The glass shattered before I even understood what was happening. I stood frozen under the soft chandelier glow, the crystal fragments of the champagne bottle cascading to the polished floor like frozen rain, and the warmth I felt trickling down the side of my face was not champagne. It was blood. My blood. My name is Sierra Maddox. Last night, my parents, Elaine and Frank Maddox, tried to break me in more ways than one. I came to my brother Grant's 40th birthday party as a guest, apparently a +1 at my own family's table, and I left as the woman they tried to erase. It was supposed to be a celebration. The Maddox estate on the hills of Portland had never looked more perfect. Fairy lights strung across ancient oaks, a live quartet playing soft jazz under the stars, expensive cars lined like trophies in the circular driveway. I had scrubbed my modest sedan inside and out, hoping, naively, that maybe, just maybe, tonight would be different, that I wouldn't be invisible, unwanted, forgotten. I wore my simplest navy blue dress, the one with clean lines and a single pearl button at the neck, the same pair of pearl studs I'd worn since college. In my hand, I carried a carefully wrapped, monogrammed pen set for Grant, a small but thoughtful gift. One I now realized never even left my purse. The valet barely concealed his surprise as I stepped out. "Name, please?" the young man with the clipboard asked politely at the grand entrance. "Sierra Maddox," I replied, shifting the gift bag nervously. His brow furrowed slightly as he traced down the printed guest list, and then turned the sheet toward me. There, beneath the grand Maddox family block heading, was everyone: Grant Maddox, Elaine Maddox, Frank Maddox, even distant cousins I hadn't seen in a decade. At the very bottom, in faint type, +1 guest of family. I smiled tightly, pinning the generic guest badge to my chest. The paper pulled awkwardly against the fabric of my dress as I moved into the house, my heels softly tapping the cool marble beneath my feet. The main ballroom door swung open in front of me, spilling laughter, music, and the clink of expensive glassware. I was swallowed by it all, and yet felt completely alone. The chandeliers overhead sparkled like constellations. My place card led me to table 18, tucked awkwardly behind a support pillar, right next to the kitchen door where servers bustled in and out with plates and shouted "hot plate" warnings. My seat? Slightly off. The silverware was misaligned, and the napkin, folded half-heartedly into a limp swan, drooped forward, defeated. I sat. I adjusted the sad little swan out of instinct, brushing my fingertips over its thin wings, as if fixing that would somehow fix me. From my corner, I watched the Maddox family orbit, like stars at the center of their own universe. Grant stood at the head table, handsome and polished, receiving endless praise from relatives and corporate friends. He just made regional VP at 39. Elaine announced loudly to anyone who would listen, "Isn't that something?" No one looked toward table 18. No one acknowledged me. Once, Frank's gaze caught mine from across the sea of clinking glasses. A slight nod. Not warmth. Not love. Just a mechanical acknowledgement of existence. I sipped from my water glass, the chill grounding me as the door swung behind me repeatedly, pushing stale air onto the sad little swan. The toasts began. The applause rolled. The speeches flowed. Then a voice, deep and familiar, boomed over the microphone. "And now, a few words from someone very special to us. Please welcome Sierra Maddox." The applause tapered into confused silence as I stood slowly, stunned. I had not prepared a speech. I had no idea why I was being called. As I walked toward the podium, the spotlight burning hot against my skin, Elaine gave me a smile, so perfectly rehearsed might have been carved from porcelain. My stomach sank. Frank sat smirking at the table. Grant barely raised his eyes from his plate. There was no card, no script, just me and the microphone. And then the screen behind me flickered to life. A video montage began rolling. The images spilled across the enormous screen in glowing, polished frames. Grant at Little League gripping a baseball bat nearly bigger than him. Grant at the middle school science fair with a clumsy cardboard volcano. Grant at high school graduation, college acceptance day, shaking hands with the mayor of Portland at his first community design award. The room buzzed with approving murmurs, punctuated by soft applause. Then came the voiceover, like a dagger wrapped in silk. My mother's voice, Elaine Maddox. From the very beginning, Grant was destined for greatness. He was the light in every room, our pride, our legacy. I stiffened, my hands clenched at my sides. Frank's voice followed smoothly. Grant always had that spark, the kind of brilliance you don't teach. It's born. My stomach churned as I stared at the smiling images of my brother frozen in time. What wasn't there were the late nights I stayed up rebuilding his presentation decks when his laptop crashed. The weekends I gave up to help him install flooring in his first office. The wire transfer receipts for $100,000 I had sent when his business had teetered on the edge of failure. I wasn't in any photo, any story, any version of their carefully constructed family mythology. The final image flashed in elegant gold, cursive across a white background, a legacy in the making. The applause rose like a tidal wave. I stood at the podium, outwardly calm, inwardly numb, and prepared to offer the polite, impersonal congratulations they expected. I leaned toward the microphone. "It's a beautiful night," I began, my voice low but steady. "And Grant, you've always had a gift for lighting up a room." I barely finished the sentence before Elaine's shrill, too bright laugh cut through the air. "Oh, honey," she called out playfully. The crowd chuckled, thinking it was some inside family joke. "Wouldn't it be the perfect gift if you handed them the condo key tonight?" The words slapped me harder than any bottle ever could have. For a beat, there was nothing, just the collective intake of breath from 200 dinner guests and the low whir of the ceiling fans. My mind scrambled, disbelieving. Had she really just announced that? My condo, my home, the $600,000 two-bedroom sanctuary in the Pearl District that I had saved and worked for, sacrificed friendships and vacations for. They wanted me to publicly gift it to Grant and Tessa as a wedding present. I turned slowly toward Elaine, keeping my voice low so only she could hear. "What?" I whispered, stunned. She smiled, wide and glistening with false warmth. "You know the one in Portland. You're never there, always traveling for work. Grant and Tessa are newlyweds. It makes perfect sense." Frank's voice boomed from the table. "Come on, Sierra, it's just a formality. You don't need all that space. You don't even use the guest room." The crowd shifted, uncertain, whispering, some watching with wide eyes, others awkwardly sipping their champagne to avoid looking. I swallowed hard. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a maneuver designed so that if I refused, I'd be painted as selfish and ungrateful. I leaned back toward the microphone and said, clear as ice, "This wasn't agreed on." A murmur rippled through the guests. Elaine flicked her hand, dismissively, as if waving away my words. "Don't be dramatic, sweetheart. It's just a gesture, a symbol of love." Every cell in my body tensed. I wanted to scream, to list every family bill I'd covered when Grant's company had faltered, to demand they remember every time I'd picked up the pieces of their golden child. But I didn't. I simply stared into my mother's eyes, into the mask of charm she wore so effortlessly, and I smiled. Not warmly, not sadly, but the kind of cold, measured smile that says, "I see you, and I will not forget this." I placed the microphone gently on the podium. It made the softest, yet most final thud. I stepped down. The party continued around me as though I had never existed. I never saw the next blow coming. I had barely made it 3 steps from the stage, weaving stiffly through the murmuring crowd, when I noticed Frank standing near the dessert table. His posture was rigid, arms tight at his sides, jaw clenched unnaturally hard. I slowed instinctively, a warning bell sounding faintly in my mind. Elaine stood just behind him, her crystal flute dangling from manicured fingers, whispering something under her breath with thin-lipped disgust. "She just embarrassed us." I heard her hiss, whether intentionally loud or cruelly careless I'll never know. My eyes flicked across the room for a safe ally. Tessa looked away. Grant stared blankly at his untouched plate. Not a single person moved toward me. I forced my breath slow, steady. The polished marble under my heels gleamed too perfectly, reflecting my distorted silhouette like a stranger. Frank took a step forward and reached for the chilled bottle of champagne on the dessert table. I foolishly thought he was going to refill his glass. Instead, with terrifying swiftness, he pivoted and swung the heavy glass bottle sideways. I barely had time to gasp. The thick base caught me just above my temple. There was a sickening crack, then blinding white, not complete unconsciousness, but a nauseating flash like a camera bulb stuck in my brain. The room spun wildly as the pressure built inside my skull. Warmth oozed down the side of my face. Gasps rippled across the nearest tables. Someone whispered, horrified, "Oh my God!" Another voice answered, "Did he just—" I staggered, clumsily catching myself on the table edge, leaving a vivid red smear against the perfect white linen. A hush swept through the ballroom. Dozens of phone cameras raised in morbid fascination. Not a single hand reached out to help. "You ungrateful brat!" Elaine spat coldly, her voice sharp and precise as shattered glass. "We brought you into our home. We gave you everything." My vision pulsed violently, my heartbeat hammering against the wound. I pressed my palm against the wet heat on my temple. The pain was sharp, searing, but worse than the injury was the humiliation, the absolute betrayal. Two nearby guests whispered, "Is she acting? She's being dramatic, right?" "No." Another voice cut flatly, "That man just hit her. I got it on video." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. Slowly, shakily, I pushed myself upright and walked forward through the silent crowd. My light blue dress clung wetly to my hip where the blood had spread in a dark maroon blossom. I passed Grant. He stared into his plate like it held the answers to the universe. Tessa's manicured fingers touched his sleeve, but she didn't stand. The weight of 100 eyes followed my every unsteady step toward the exit. The night air outside struck my burning skin like cold silk. I kept walking. No one followed me. I fumbled my phone from my purse with trembling fingers, streaking the screen with faint crimson. The Uber driver's voice, when he finally arrived, was soft and worried. "Ma'am, are you okay?" I answered only hospital. Inside the sterile fluorescent brightness of the emergency room, time slowed painfully. The nurse, middle-aged, kind but weary, asked questions she had probably repeated 1,000 times to women who arrived alone and bleeding. "Anyone coming to stay with you tonight?" she asked softly while gently pressing gauze to my temple. I shook my head. "No, just me." Her eyes flickered with silent understanding. "You're not the first," she murmured, taping the bandage with a practiced tenderness. I leaned back against the cold vinyl cot, staring at the bland toothpaste-colored ceiling tiles, letting the truth settle heavily in my chest. This was the last time I would show up for any of them. The pain came in waves throughout the night. My head throbbed with every beat of my heart, and each dull pulse was a cruel reminder of how fast everything had unraveled. I left the hospital just before dawn, refusing the kind nurse's offer to call anyone. There was no one to call. I slid into the back seat of another silent Uber, forehead bandaged, clothes stiff with dried blood, and rode in numb silence across the still-sleeping city to the small apartment of my friend Leah. When I let myself in with the spare key, she had already left a soft towel and a mug of chamomile tea on the nightstand. I didn't touch either. I simply lay on the bed, fully dressed, shoes and all, staring blankly at the ceiling, waiting for morning to come. The sunlight that finally filtered through Leah's linen curtains felt hostile, too bright and sharp for what I had become. I blinked slowly, the memory of glass, shattering, and judgmental stares flooding back all at once. I reached for my phone out of habit. Dozens of notifications lit up the cracked screen. None from family, not from Grant, not even from Frank or Elaine feigning concern. Only old co-workers and distant acquaintances reacting to something I hadn't yet seen. My hands shook slightly as I tapped open a link. A shaky phone recording played on loop. Me stumbling backward, crimson blooming across my temple under the ballroom lights. Someone gasping loudly off camera. I pressed delete, but my hands kept trembling. Desperate for routine, I forced myself through the motions. I showered carefully, wincing each time I tilted my head under the water. I dried my hair mechanically. Then I reached for my purse, an old mental ritual. Check phone, wallet, keys. Phone. There. Wallet. There. Lip balm. Receipts, the half-eaten granola bar I forgot to throw out last week. All there. Except my condo key. The small silver key I always clipped inside the side pocket. I dumped the entire contents onto the bed, spreading out every loose coin, pen, and paper scrap. It was gone. A cold realization crawled up my spine. 1 week ago, after a family dinner at my parents' house in West Hills, Frank had casually picked up my purse, claiming, "I thought it was your mother's," as he handed it back with a sheepish shrug. I had laughed at the time. I wasn't laughing now. The phone vibrated sharply against my knee, snapping me from my panic. An unknown number. I answered instinctively, my voice raw and hoarse. "Hi, Miss Maddox. This is Jeanette from HomeQuest Realty. I'm just confirming our 2 p.m. appointment for the walkthrough at your Pearl District condo. We'll meet you at the entrance, unless you'd prefer to use the lockbox." My stomach plummeted into ice. "I didn't schedule anything," I whispered. Jeanette sounded puzzled, flipping through her notes. "It's listed under your name. A Mr. Frank Maddox was noted as a co-signer, and the listing account has your property title attached. Did you want to cancel?" I could barely breathe. My father had never been a co-signer. I never gave them a key. I never listed my home for sale. Yes, cancel. Immediately, I croaked. I hung up and sat frozen at the edge of the bed. My elbows dug painfully into my knees as I stared at the floor, trying to ground myself in anything solid, anything real. They hadn't just tried to humiliate me. They were now actively trying to erase me, steal from me. The phone slipped from my hand onto the carpet as I opened my laptop with mechanical precision. The cursor blinked at me in quiet accusation. I clicked to compose a new email. "Hi Marlo, we met briefly last fall at the Portland Women in Business Brunch. I hope you remember me. I believe my parents are attempting to fraudulently sell my condo. I have no proof yet, but I just received a call from a realtor regarding a showing I never authorized. They have a key I never gave them. Can we talk? Sierra Maddox." I hit send with a shaking hand and reached numbly for my coat. I had no intention of waiting. By noon, I was already standing outside my condo in the Pearl District, staring at the door with its perfect glossy blue finish, a door I no longer trusted. The locksmith, a heavy-set man in faded coveralls, frowned as he examined the handle. "Someone's been in and out," he muttered. "Scratches are fresh." Like they didn't know exactly where the key slots. "Change everything," I whispered. He nodded solemnly. "Want me to add a deadbolt, too?" I nodded again, watching as he got to work. The fine scratches carved near the handle made my skin crawl. It wasn't a break-in, it was access. Familiar, casual, entitled access. That night, after the locksmith finally left, I sat in the silent condo surrounded by the faint chemical smell of metal and lubricant, clutching a cold bowl of reheated soup I never touched. I stared at the darkened skyline of Portland through the window and whispered aloud into the empty room. "They're trying to take everything. But not this time. Not me." The email reply came at 8:13 a.m. sharp the next morning. Marlowe's response was short but decisive. I'm available anytime today. We'll fix this. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred from exhaustion. Before I could even gather my thoughts, another message arrived. The sender made my stomach clench. Elaine Maddox. The subject line was as disingenuous as the woman herself. Let's talk. I clicked. Sierra, we love you. This has gone far enough. Please come by the house this afternoon. No guests. Just us. Let's fix this. Mom. I stared at the words for longer than I should have. I wasn't angry anymore, not even hurt. What remained was something colder, heavier. Clarity. I knew this wasn't a peace offering. I knew exactly what this was. Still, I needed to see it through. Maybe some foolish, frayed thread of hope wanted to believe they might apologize. I slipped on my coat and keys and drove toward the house I had once called home. The front yard was manicured to perfection, solar lights lining freshly mulched flower beds. It felt staged. The porch swing that had creaked for decades sat suspiciously silent. Elaine opened the front door before I could even knock. Sierra, baby, she gushed, pulling me into a stiff embrace that was 3 degrees too cold. Thank you for coming. I stepped inside. The living room had been transformed into a stage theater set. Fresh orchids adorned the coffee table. A perfect lemon tea service sat waiting with my favorite shortbread cookies. The framed photographs had been rearranged, conveniently placed childhood memories of me and Grant at the lake. A blurry photo of me at my high school debate finals. Even the lighting had been softened to an almost cinematic glow. It was a performance. Grant was already there, perched on the armrest of the leather couch, staring at the floor, lips pressed into a tense line. He glanced up once, but said nothing. Tessa was conspicuously absent. Elaine gestured gracefully toward the armchair I used to sit in every Christmas morning to unwrap presents. We just want to make things right, she purred. I didn't sit. Frank appeared from the hallway, carrying a stiff manila envelope. His expression was unreadable, a blend of smugness and calculation. We've been thinking about how to prevent misunderstandings going forward, he said smoothly. We don't want anyone to get hurt again. I stared at the envelope. What is that? Just something to help define family boundaries, he replied, offering it like a peace offering. You know, to keep things fair and clear. I opened it slowly, heart sinking as the bold title burned into my vision. Deed transfer agreement. I flipped to the last page. My name on the title. Their signature lines awaiting mine. Legal language dressed up as civility. Internal arrangement, mutual understanding, asset clarification. My jaw clenched. You're asking me to sign over my condo, I said flatly. Elaine folded her hands delicately in her lap. It's just paperwork, sweetheart. You don't even use all that space by yourself. Frank snorted impatiently. You don't need to read the whole thing. Don't you trust us? I stepped back slightly, the air in the room suddenly heavier, denser. My gaze swept across the room. The curated photos, the cookies, the soft floral scent designed to lower my guard. They had laid a trap and disguised it as family. No, I said finally, voice razor-sharp but calm. You invited me here to give up the last piece of myself you don't already control. That's not what this is, Frank said, jaw tightening. I closed the folder with deliberate slowness, placed it carefully back on the polished coffee table, and let my fingers rest lightly on top of it. Yes, it is. I turned toward the door, pausing for a final look at the house. It didn't even feel like mine anymore. I had spent years begging them to see me. I wasn't begging anymore. I'm not signing anything, I said, steady and final. Not now. Not ever. Elaine's voice wavered behind me, slipping ever so slightly from sweetness into panic. Sierra, please don't do this. Don't tear the family apart. I paused at the door without turning back. You already did that years ago. I stepped outside into the sharp, cleansing cold of the Portland air. I closed the car door behind me before the first tear slid down my cheek. I didn't wipe it away. I let it fall freely as I pulled out my phone and dialed. Marlo picked up on the second ring. Sierra. I'm ready to go all in, I whispered. File everything. I didn't sleep that night. The minutes dragged mercilessly into hours as I lay in bed staring at the faint city glow leaking through the blinds. No music, no television, no mindless scrolling. Just the heavy silence pressing in like fog. I got up at dawn, made myself a bitter cup of black tea, and sat at my tiny kitchen table watching the steam rise and curl in the cold morning air. The condensation on the window blurred the outside world, almost like it was trying to shield me from what was coming. By 9:32 a.m., I was parked outside Marlo's downtown office. The building was eerily quiet compared to the normal weekday chaos. Inside, the receptionist gave me a sympathetic nod and waved me through. Marlo was already standing at his desk, sleeves rolled up, a thick file in hand. He didn't waste time. I reviewed everything last night, he said, gesturing for me to sit. They've left a mess, but here's the good news. I raised an eyebrow, exhausted and numb. There's good news. He flipped to the second page and tapped a signature line with his pen. You still legally hold the deed to the house they're living in. I blinked, the words not quite registering. What? Their home in West Hills? You bought it in 2010. Foreclosure rescue. They never filed the paperwork to transfer the title back into their names. They've been living there for over a decade under the assumption it was theirs. It isn't. I sat back in stunned silence, the weight of the information settling slowly like warm oil through cold water. I gave them a lifeline, I murmured. They turned it into a noose. Marlo's expression softened slightly. You have options. A lot of them. I stared down at the documents, at my own signature from 14 years earlier, unknowing then how prophetic it would become. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to steady ground beneath my feet. I took a slow breath and picked up the pen he offered without hesitation. I want them out, I said firmly. All of them. I don't care how civilized it looks. File the notice to vacate today. By the time I walked back into my apartment that evening, the air felt different. It was still quiet but not suffocating. I brewed another cup of tea and stared out the window as the sun dipped low over the city skyline. There was no sense of triumph, just direction. I wasn't driven by rage anymore. They had already taken too much of my life through emotion. What I had now was colder, sharper, and far more dangerous to them. Detachment. The legal process moved quickly. Within 72 hours, the sheriff's department hand-delivered the official eviction order to my parents' home. I wasn't there to see it happen, but I didn't need to be. Grant, ever the compulsive chronicler of his life, shared a grainy security camera clip to the family group chat as if begging for attention. The shaky footage showed Frank opening the front door in a wrinkled bathrobe, holding a half-eaten piece of toast. His expression shifted rapidly from confusion to disbelief as the uniformed officer handed him the thick envelope. Elaine stood frozen behind him, mid-sip of coffee from her favorite porcelain mug, her lips parting soundlessly. Frank ripped open the papers, scanned them with wild eyes, and slapped them against the wall with a furious snarl. The clip cut off right as Elaine seemed to yell something at the officer, though the audio didn't capture it. I watched the video once, then again. I closed the app and put my phone down. The darkness of my apartment wrapped around me like a soft, protective shield. No music, no celebration, just the soft ticking of the kitchen clock and the distant hum of cars below. They were gone. For the first time, I allowed myself to believe it. The next morning, I didn't wake to the scent of coffee or the sound of my phone buzzing with demands. I woke to silence, thick, heavy, full-bodied silence, but this time it didn't smother me. It cocooned me. I padded barefoot into the kitchen, made another mug of strong tea, and let it steep longer than usual. I stood at the window, watching condensation bead and trickle down the glass like tiny rivers, distorting the skyline into soft, watercolor blurs. For the first time, I didn't brace for the next blow. At 10:04 a.m., my phone vibrated against the counter. A notification from social media. I sighed, already knowing something waited. Against my better judgment, I unlocked the screen. There it was, a video posted by Elaine. My stomach clenched, but my hand stayed calm as I tapped play. It was me, my voice cracking as I stood at Grant's party, saying those fatal words. This wasn't agreed on. The clip had been cut expertly, spliced between shots of Grant laughing with balloons and me standing rigid, alone under the stage lights. The caption read, "We raised her with love. We never expected betrayal." Beneath it, hashtag spilled like venom. Hashtag family matters, hashtag broken hearts, hashtag daughter of strangers, hashtag some kids are never satisfied. The comments preview sick of me. Ungrateful. We need the whole story. Some people just can't be pleased no matter how much you give them. They were rewriting history in real time. They weren't erasing me anymore. They were recasting me as villain. I inhaled deeply and let the phone rest face down on the countertop. No shaking this time. No panic. No spiraling. I knew exactly what to do. I opened my Dropbox account and started uploading. Every dated wire transfer from my account to theirs. The original deed for my condo. The real estate documents proving they tried to list my property without consent. The email threads, saved voicemails, even the casual text from Elaine begging me to cover Grant's mortgage. Just this once. I labeled the folder simply Truth. No hashtags, no commentary, no dramatic callouts. Just evidence. Cold, complete, undeniable. I closed the laptop and stared at the closed screen for a long moment, listening to the faint drip of water from the kitchen sink. I didn't care if it went viral. I didn't care if people clicked. The point wasn't attention. The point was I no longer owed them my silence. The sun had shifted low across the horizon when I finally left the apartment. I walked to a small storage bin I hadn't touched in years. Buried under an old college sweatshirt was a faded leather photo album, the one I had made in high school when I was still foolish enough to believe in happy family memories. I flipped through page after page, me with braces and bad bangs in band camp, standing awkwardly at my senior prom in a floral dress I begged Elaine not to make me wear, winning my first debate trophy, proof that I had existed, whether they acknowledged it or not. Near the back I found it, a small yellow sticky note, curling at the edges from age. My father's handwriting. Kez knew you had it in you. Proud of you, kid. Dad, my chest tightened. I closed the book gently and slid it back into the bin. You loved me once, I whispered to the empty apartment, but that doesn't excuse who you are now. As if summoned by the universe, another message lit up my phone. The name startled me. Uncle Marvin, Elaine's older brother. Someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Saw the folder. About time someone told the truth. If you need a witness, I'm here. I stared at the text for a long time. Not because I needed to respond immediately, but because for the first time someone had finally looked past the illusion and chosen to see me. The glass house hadn't shattered all at once. It was breaking pane by pane, truth by truth, one person at a time. I placed the phone gently on the counter, made another cup of tea, and stood by the window as the last light of day dipped below the Portland skyline. I let the silence fill me. This wasn't weakness. This was revolution. Sometimes justice doesn't look like standing over someone. Sometimes it looks like choosing not to stand beside them ever again. The envelope arrived 2 days later, tucked between junk mail and a bill for internet service I barely used anymore. It stood out immediately. Thick cream paper, no return address, my name written in elegant, looping cursive. My breath caught. I didn't need to open it to know who it was from. I recognized Tessa's handwriting. I sat at the kitchen table, turning the envelope between my fingers under the soft glow of the overhead light. Finally, I slid a letter opener along the sealed edge and pulled out the single sheet of stationery. The message was short, painfully simple. I'm sorry. I didn't know how far they went. You deserved better. Tessa, no excuses. No elaboration. No attempt to soften the edges. Just acknowledgement. A weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying lifted ever so slightly from my chest. I stared at the note for a long time, not out of indecision, but reflection. The part of me that once would have longed for reconciliation, that would have sprinted to meet even the smallest olive branch, had grown quiet, wiser, stronger. I thought about tearing it up. I thought about burning it, letting the smoke carry away the last embers of what used to be. But then another voice inside me, calmer and older, reminded me that some fires just leave useless ashes. Some bridges don't need dramatic flames. They can simply fade unused. I placed the note back in the envelope and set it aside. I picked up my phone and wrote a check to the Portland Women's Shelter instead. In the memo line, I scrawled, in honor of a new beginning. I did not attend the baby shower. I did not call or text or reply. Some cycles don't need screaming conclusions. Some stories don't need fire. Sometimes silence, chosen freely, is its own revolution. That night, I cooked dinner, just pasta with olive oil, garlic, and thyme. Simple, clean, mine. I set 2 plates, not out of habit but intention. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. I opened it to find Amina standing there, smiling, a bottle of red wine tucked under one arm and a tiny orchid plant cradled in the other. You need more green in here, she teased, brushing past me into the kitchen like she had always belonged. She placed the orchid by the window and turned to help me serve the plates. We ate slowly, talking about work, about books, about a terrible news show she was obsessed with and I promised I'd never watch. We laughed freely, the kind of deep, full-body laughter I hadn't realized I missed. At some point, my gaze drifted to the small linen swan folded neatly on the center of the table. The same one I had saved from that disastrous night, edges soft now, the crease less perfect, but still holding its shape, still standing, still mine. I thought about the girl I used to be, hiding in corners at parties, folding napkins like armor, smiling too brightly when ignored. I thought about the woman I had become. Not bitter, not cruel, just complete. I raised my glass toward Amina. To building our own tables, I said softly. She clinked her glass against mine, smiling, and never begging for a seat again. I let the warmth of the wine and her words settle deep into my bones. I didn't think about what they had lost. I thought about what I had reclaimed. Not just a condo or dignity, but presence, identity, a quiet kind of power they could never touch again. The next morning, light streamed into the apartment, unfiltered, unobstructed, clean, calm, mine. The folded swan still sat at the center of the table, like a silent sentinel of survival. I gently smoothed its edges with my fingertip and whispered into the soft stillness. They gave me back everything by trying to take it all. Sometimes the deepest wounds come not from strangers, but from the people who raised us. But this story wasn't about betrayal anymore. It was about reclamation, about peace, about becoming whole again. I glanced out the window at the city that was mine again and smiled. I was free,